Okay. So we're talking about Kohlberg's theory of moral development, which we've got broken up into 3 levels, 1, 2, 3. Our first level is a pre-conventional egocentric level, meaning that all motivation for behaving with morals is based either on obedience and punishment, i.e. you want to avoid the punishment, or it's based on self-interest, you want to gain some kind of reward. This is typically the sort of moral development that we see with young children. As this is going to be applied to literature, I am a high school teacher of English. I will be discussing these in the context of literature. I'll also be breaking down some of the assignments and activities that I would present to my class. So not all of this presentation will be in real time. Some of it will be condensed as to how I would teach it. So we have our first level, and then we can move on to level 2, which is a conventional level of development, which is mostly concerned with consequences for others. So often we'll see that people want to behave with conformity and accord so that they can secure approval from their peers. Additionally, they come to recognize that they want to maintain some kind of social order. That is, they want to maintain accord socially and have a functional social spectrum. Kohlberg's final level of moral principles is post-conventional. This is where we start to develop our sense of a social contract and notice that reciprocity with others is mutually beneficial, but it doesn't end there. Kohlberg says that for us to be fully morally developed, we need to more than recognize mutual benefits. We need to understand that morality transcends mutual benefits and in terms of basically behaving for a better world, not just for a better lifestyle or better quality of life for you or I. So this is briefly Kohlberg's theory and essentially what I would present to my class. Now, a little bit of understanding for him. He was influenced by Piaget, who said that individuals progress from stages of external morality, i.e. having your rules enforced by an authority figure, to autonomous morality, where you just essentially decide on your own to behave morally. Kohlberg elaborated on this theory by saying that stages of moral development are cross-cultural and that moral development influences moral behavior. If you look at his theory of moral development, most of the issues are not what you think is wrong, but why you think they're wrong, and that is your indicator of how, quote-unquote, morally developed you are. In bringing a hiatus to my class to discuss all of this content that they would be covering, because this would be a lot for a high school English class to absorb, I would present the anecdote that Kohlberg discusses, which is the man who robs the drugstore. And the anecdote is one that's typically talked about in psychology classes, and I think a lot of my students probably would have heard it before, but here it is. So a man has a wife who's sick and she's dying of cancer. There's a medicine that he needs that will cure her. The druggist has the medicine, and the druggist gets the medicine for $100. However, the druggist also charges 10 times the price. He charges $1,000. The man goes, tries to debate with him, tries to cajole him into giving him the drug, completely unsuccessful. Eventually, the man gets desperate and he goes and robs the drugstore. Now, the question that you pose is, was it morally correct for him to do such a thing? So he robbed someone of their livelihood, but he also saved his wife's life. So this would lead into a lot of discussions, and again, we would see that Kohlberg also has a theory, which is not written up here, but that in stages of stress we revert to previous levels of morality. So a man who initially didn't have to be concerned with level 1 morality suddenly becomes reverting to it, i.e. he's breaking the law in order to do what he thinks is morally correct, which would be to save the life of his wife, etc., etc. So we cover all this. This would take a little time. And then eventually, I, for myself, would want to bring this into some kind of application of teaching literature, because that's essentially what I do. And I emphasize in my courses that all canonical literature deals with values and can play a role in value formation. I have to spend a lot of time explaining to them why we have a canon. And essentially, we have lots of discussions about why do you find all the same pieces of literature used no matter what high school you go to, and a lot of transfer students can contribute to this conversation. We talk about how fables when you're a kid show consequences for your actions. You know, what happens to Goldilocks when she goes into somebody's house and invades, and the bears come home and see her, and what happens to children that disobey, and fables, and then you move it on further, you know. What was Harper Lee really talking about when she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, you know, if there was really a message there. And at the base they'll say racism, oh well, racism was the theme of To Kill a Mockingbird, and then you lead them further to say, okay, well if you think about what was the moral of the story to Goldilocks, which essentially was you shouldn't be intruding upon someone's house, what would the moral of the story be to Kill a Mockingbird? And they say, oh well, racism, and you say, no, 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 no. If Harper Lee's trying to teach you a message, what is it? They say, oh, okay, well, racism's bad. And I say, exactly. So here's an issue here. Here's a value that Harper Lee is promoting, which essentially says that we should treat one another with equality. So my kids have spent most of their spring senior semester analyzing Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Now we take about 3 weeks just reading the book. Pride and Prejudice is roughly over 300 pages. It is very, very plot-oriented, and it is very, very complicated in terms of plot. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there is essentially no description in the book. It is event after event after event with lots and lots of dialogue. So we spend about 3 weeks asking questions which orient us to the book in terms of plot. You know, what happened here? Who said this? How would you characterize this character? And I'll attach for you in my upload all the questions that I would submit to them. I usually have them discuss it in groups, and then we do a review at the end of the week. But essentially the conclusion that we will hopefully come to draw by the end of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice is that characters who behave morally are rewarded, characters who behave immorally are punished. An example of this in Pride and Prejudice is that Miss Bingley tries to intervene in the marriage of Charles Bingley and Jane. And Miss Bingley, she's repeatedly deceitful, she's manipulative, her plan fails, and additionally she's rejected by Darcy. She wants to marry Darcy because he's Mr. Moneybags. And Darcy, in turn, marries the morally upstanding Elizabeth Bennet. So we want to see how Kohlberg's theory of moral development applies to this particular piece of literature. We can also use this in discussions of social commentary and development of a thesis, which I will present to you in part 2. So you can hit the end button.